Ladies, welcome. Thank you so much for being here for our second series that we're doing for In the Becoming. We are actually going to be talking about anxiety. And so I know that anxiety shows up in a variety of forms and many different people, many different ways for each person's life. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is just sharing personally our own experiences with anxiety and really what damage has anxiety inflicted upon our living. Because I think we can confuse anxiety with, I just worry a lot. But the way I know that you, Jamina, have experienced anxiety is very similar to mine, and it is paralyzing. And it has just it robbed me of many years of being able to live in freedom and being able to live where I trusted God. And so it can just level you out. It can just take us out. So that's what I want us to be talking about. And really, I just want us to share, again, personally, what has anxiety looked like in our lives? How does it show up in your life? And kind of where did this begin? So Jamina, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us what anxiety looks like for you and how you experience it, that would be great.
Yeah, mine is definitely centered around death. I feel like I have a major in death and then like a minor in people. My major, I would say, is definitely I'm afraid of, I used to be more afraid, when I was little of my mom passing away because it was just me and her growing up. But now it's more something happening to my husband. And now that I have kids, it's more something happening to me and leaving my kids with no mother. And so for me, I get to live out what that looks like constantly, and I seem to mourn my own death a lot. Yeah. And I go through step by step of what that's going to look like. And so I don't just think about it, but I'm there. Like I'm at my own funeral, and then I'm in my own. I can see my husband already getting remarried, and my kids not being welcomed in this family. Just all the things that could go wrong. I live it. So that would be my major problem. The minor part, I think, is definitely just being dropped by people. Is just a sudden feeling of this friend doesn't like me anymore, so they're dropping me, and feeling just very, kind of left in the dark of what I did wrong and not being able to fix that situation. And that shows up a lot more in social things, but the death one is the one probably paralyzes me the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think for me, it's always worst case scenario, and that's how it manifests for me is almost everything I'm thinking ahead and how to avoid or keep from people dying, from my kids getting hurt, from all of those kinds of things. I'm always thinking ahead and planning, and so it really manifests for me in that way of just constantly trying to prevent pain and suffering from happening in my life or my family's lives.
And do you feel like in that because this is where I have always got myself tripped up. If I worry about it enough, if I imagine every possible scenario of what could happen, then I can prevent it from happening. Is that how you feel like it is for you? I need to stay one step ahead of it. Then that way I can keep it from happening. Even though it's if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Because I'm the same way as you. My anxiety stems purely from the fear that death is imminent. I am seconds away from dying. And I live in that. Even though it's completely irrational and it's probably not even, the threat is not real, in my mind it is so real. So, Jamina, how does that look like for you as far as do you remember a time in your life that kind of catapulted this? Is there a moment, or did you experience something that led you to believe, what is it about death that kind of birthed that fear?
Yes. So growing up, my dad was kind of out of the picture, and so therefore my mom had to use nannies in order to take care of me after school and during summer and whatnot. So I would have a nanny, and one of them in particular told me that my mom was probably late because she got in a car accident, and it just stemmed in me something that I hadn't thought about before. And my physical reaction to that was crying and throwing up, which has continued to be my physical reaction to it as an adult, has just been that nauseous feeling. And most of the time I can throw up from it. But I think it has changed. It has developed, I would say, from the fear of my mom, to now what does that look like. And so I can even point to times where I've been to the doctor and I don't even know if the pain is real that I feel in my chest, or I just heard about somebody who felt pain in their chest and maybe it's lung cancer, Yeah. And so sometimes it's hard to even be in touch with reality, I would say, because I just don't know what's real sometimes.
Well, and I think for people like us, when we suffer from anxiety, Google is our worst enemy. And it's not helpful.
But you're trying to help yourself at the same time by using it.
Yeah.
You think it's good for you.
Yes. Yeah. How about you, Jenny? Do you feel like there is one event, or did this just kind of slowly transpire in your life? What did that look like for you?
I think I can look back at my childhood and see a lot of unsafe situations that I was in, and just feeling insecure in relationships with family members and or just circumstances. And I also think it's a generational thing for me too. Like I can see the people in my family even manifesting anxiety, and then kind of I think that transpired in for me too, growing up. And so, yeah, definitely childhood. And I can't maybe pinpoint one experience that maybe triggered it, but just kind of this general sense of anxiousness and maybe not feeling safe or secure in my home life that kind of sent me down this path of that's kind of how I live and how we lived was in this anxious state. So as an adult, I think that's just carried into life for me.
Wow.
And feeling like I need to control and make things not happen or do my best so that they won't happen. And just, it's a battle.
Oh, it's definitely a battle, an everyday battle.
Yeah.
So I would like to use this portion of our time together to share my personal story with anxiety. And as we were just talking to Jamina and Jennie and asking them, what has anxiety looked like in your life and really how did that materialize, I'm going to share my story about anxiety and how that has shown up for me. And so really how it's happened is pretty extreme. I would say that it's, kind of more really definitely on that extreme level where it's not just you just worry too much. I wish that's what it was, and I wish that's how my experience went, but that's not the case. So really what happened is during the first year of my marriage to my husband, Matt and I, we were pregnant with what would be our first child together. So when we had gotten married, I was a single mom, and so I had already brought, my daughter Presley into the marriage with us. So we were about to have our first child together. And we ended up losing our daughter to a stillbirth. And so the experience of that was, something entirely on its own, very traumatic. But what had happened during the labor and the delivery, that really is what brought on what I have just called the beast of anxiety. Because anxiety showed up in a way that I didn't even know was humanly possible. And so again, I so wish that I could just sit here and tell you, oh, my anxiety is it's simply me worrying too much, but it just went so far beyond that. I honestly do not know how or why my husband did not institutionalize me. And that's not even me joking around. That's I truly don't know. Because it is not a stretch whatsoever to say that I came to the very brink of truly losing my ever-loving mind. And I don't know who, is going to be listening or watching who has had or is having these debilitating episodes of anxiety. But, you know, if you are, then you will know when I say this, that it's just not only reserved to the mind. It is a full bodily, you know, participation event. And so my body physically reacted to anxiety in such a forceful way. It was one of those things that I didn't know. It's like, okay, am I going to throw up? Am I going to have diarrhea? Am I going to pass out? Am I going to faint? Or is it going to be all of those? So when the attacks would hit, I would run around the house like a maniac, and then I would run to the bathroom, you know, where it's like I have a toilet and I have a trash can, and I'm going to sit there and truly just wait for what I knew was my certain death to just swallow me whole. And so really what my anxiety revolved around was death. And so I became convinced that every single thing in existence was going to kill me. So I had to stop driving, because if I was driving and if I saw a piece of trash on the road, I just knew it's a roadside bomb, and as soon as I drive over it, it's going to explode and I'm going to die. Airplanes, we used to live really close to an airport, and so airplanes were flying over our house all the time. And so the second that I would hear one, I would make a mad dash, right? And I would run out the door, I would run into the street, and I would search the sky just desperately and frantically until I could locate it to make sure it's still up in the sky, like it's up in the air, because I knew like it's going to crash into our house and it's going to kill me. And I stopped being able to sleep at night because, again, I was convinced that men were going to break into our house and they were going to rape and kill me and the girls. And so really what happened was I just stopped doing everything that I loved and enjoyed, because it completely paralyzed me and just immobilized me to the point where I couldn't do anything anymore. I didn't want to do anything anymore. I loved to travel. Like, I absolutely loved to travel. I would get on an airplane. I would fly. I loved to fly. Oh my gosh, it was one of those things that just brought me joy, and I thought it was amazing, and I couldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't fly anywhere because I had such a horrific anxiety attack when we were on an airplane going to visit Matt's family one time. I stopped like driving in the car or even riding in the car. You know, another place that I love to be more than any other place in the world is in the mountains. So we would go there frequently. Like, we would go to the mountains as a family. I stopped going. Like, we couldn't do that anymore either, because I just knew if we go into the mountains, we are going to drive off, you know, the edge of the mountain, and we're going to die in this horrible, fiery car crash. And so really, these are all the things that were going through my mind at all times. It was constantly death, the threat of death. And so I would frantically, you know, shoot out of bed, because I would have a lot of these attacks at night. And so I would be asleep, or I would be, you know, just getting into bed, and then I would just dart out of bed, and then I would run outside so I could press my face. Like, I would lay on the ground and press my face against the cold concrete or the cold grass so that I could feel something, just anything that felt shocking to my body, to assure myself that I was still alive. And again, this is how it went on. I truly did. Like, when I say that I lost all soundness of mind, I'm serious. I didn't know. I had no control over my mind anymore, none. And I was just in this, what felt like an unreturnable pit of hopeless despair. And so I just got to this place where I couldn't do anything during the day other than grab my Bible, and I would go down to our basement, I would open it up, and I would lay myself, like my face, I would just plant it, you know, face first in the Word, on God's Word, and I would bury it in there, and I would press it in there so deep and just bawl. And I would just bawl my heart and soul out to God. And as I did that, I would just, you know, uncontrollably sobbing and pleading with Him with whatever strength I had left. And I had no words. I didn't even know what to say other than just help me. Like, please, God, help me. You have to restore my mind. Please restore my mind. And then really what ended up happening is I had like the episode that I really often refer to as this is the nail in the coffin for me. And this episode happened. And this is the one that told me, you have truly reached the lowest, darkest point of your life. And so I had just gotten into bed and you know, it was so normal at this point. You know, I laid down and once I did, as I was trying to go to sleep, I just sat straight up in bed because again, just this attack had come over me and it had just hit me so hard. And as I am sitting up, I suddenly, you know, had this full knowledge and understanding of how mothers could kill their children. And the reason why I had this full knowledge of it and understanding is because I knew I'm at that point. I could do the same thing. I understand because I'm capable of doing that very same thing. And so my husband was sitting there sleeping next to me and I reached over and I tapped him on the shoulder. And when he woke up, I said to him, I said, I need help now. And I knew like, I'm coming up to to the point of no return. And so I'm gonna stop right there because this is really kind of that place for me where this is where things, where we started to move in a good direction. This is where progress started to happen. This is where we started to take steps and, really started to take things seriously and getting me help. But this is, I'm going to share kind of how that looked, like what those steps look like as we progress through this series and as we look at the different things that we're going to look at as we go through anxiety and talking about anxiety and seeing, what is anxiety? What is, ultimately, what does that say about how our lack of trust in God? What does that say about, what we believe to be true about God? We're just going to look at all of those different types of things. And so I will share more with you and just kind of, unveil that as we go along. But I just want you to know this is something that is deeply personal to me and something that I, have gone through for years. We're talking years. This wasn't just, this happened for a short amount of time. This was ongoing for years. And so I just kind of condensed it all just to kind of give you, the nuts and bolts of it. But that's just what I want you to know. Like, this is very personal for me. This means a lot to me. I understand. I have tremendous, empathy for women who experience anxiety. I get it. I just get it. I know how out of control we feel and how we have kind of the knowledge to say this is ridiculous and this is so, irrational and uncalled for. I understand that, but it feels so real. So that's what we're going to look at. We are going to hear from other women. We're going to hear their stories with anxiety, how it's shown up in their lives. We're going to hear a lot about that. And then we're also going to be in God's Word a lot and just learn from, of course, the Creator and the Creator of our minds about what anxiety, what that means for us and how He is there to help us. So I can't wait for you to join us, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week and the weeks following. Thanks so much, ladies. Have a wonderful day.